First John is written by the Apostle John, and he's writing the book of First John to this group of believers who are in the midst of a real crisis of faith. They are completely confused. People are leaving God's church because of this crisis of faith where they have believed that Jesus was God and came in the flesh, that he was crucified, that he was buried, that he resurrected. But at the same time, what their culture is saying, what the Greek culture would say, is that everything made of flesh and blood was evil. And the only way to get good out of life had to be spiritual. And so you can see they have a real crisis of faith where if the culture of that day is saying flesh is evil, they're going, well, and then how could God take on flesh if it's evil? I think that's kind of where we find ourselves today. Not so much that flesh is evil, but in a place where secular culture is influencing more and more what we believe about God, what we believe about Jesus, what we believe about his word. I believe that it will not be our rhetoric or our arguments that change the hearts and minds of people around us in our world. I think there's only one thing that's going to change the hearts and minds of people all over our planet. And it's a word that's probably overused, probably used incorrectly. A small little word called love. That's what's going to change the hearts and minds of people all over our planet. 1 John chapter 4, verse 10 says this: "This is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sin." That's love. That God gave up his Son for each and every one of us. A few years ago, I was at a missions conference in Richmond, and man, there were big-time speakers from all over the world there. And one of the most powerful things that I heard at this conference was said by the president of the missions conference that year, where he talked about the church being the away team. That the church was no longer the home team, but it was the away team. And I don't know if you've ever been to sporting events and seen how the away team is treated. I had the opportunity a few years ago with some friends of mine to go to a Monday night football game for the Washington Redskins. And let me just tell you, my parents, who won a Super Bowl? Tampa Bay. I'm a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan this year. Right, Wes? But growing up, my parents were huge Dallas Cowboy fans, right? And a few of those in here too, right? But somebody paid for me a ticket to go to a Washington Redskins game, so I was a Redskins fan that night. Let me just tell you, it was a Monday night football game, Washington Redskins. I'm not supposed to say that. That's probably culturally incorrect, isn't it? The Washington football team. Who said? They the Redskins. In Fluvanna, they're going to be the Redskins. And they're playing the New York Giants on Monday Night Football. About halfway through the game, we had to go to the restroom. And I walk in the restroom, and there are these New York Giants fans, and I know they're New York Giants fans because they had a jersey on. They're standing there using the restroom, and while these guys are using the restroom, people are cursing at them. I mean, violently cursing, because they have a New York Giants jersey on. That's the way the away team is treated. And folks, I'm telling you, culturally, we're not moving closer and closer to Jesus. We're moving further and further away. According to Pew Research, the religious landscape of the United States continues to decline at a rapid pace. In a phone survey taken in 2018-2019, where 65% of American adults described themselves as Christians. And you think, well, 65%, that's pretty good, except for the fact that that's down 12% over the last 10 years. Meanwhile, the religiously unaffiliated, consisting of those who describe their religious identity as atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular, now stands at 26%, up from 17% in 2009. What's super alarming is that for the first time in American history, the emerging generations are less Christian than others. Aaron shared with you recently that college students are walking away from the faith at alarming rates. Less than half, 49% of millennials describe themselves as Christians. That's 4 out of 10 people are religious nuns. Just like in John's day, people were leaving the faith. And over the next few weeks, we invite you to come along this journey with us and see exactly what John wrote to those who are struggling in the faith. Because I think that's where we find ourselves as well. While this is nice and we can be in one service and unified together and it feels somewhat normal, folks, I'm afraid we don't need to go back to normal, because normal looked like we would miss church for whatever happened. Oh, the winery was putting on a great sale this weekend. Oh, the kids had sporting events. If that's normal, we don't need to go back to that. We cannot continue to let culture influence our faith. 1 John chapter 1, starting in verse 1. We're going to make it all the way through 4 verses today. You're welcome. That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked at, and our hands have touched, this we proclaim concerning the word of life. The life appeared, we have seen it and testified to it, and we proclaim to you the eternal life which was with the Father and has appeared to us. We proclaim to you what we have seen and heard, so that you also may have fellowship with us. And our fellowship is with the Father and with His Son, Jesus Christ. We write this to make our joy complete. Remember, the Greek philosophy of the day is this idea that only good comes from the spiritual and that flesh and blood is evil. And what John begins to do in his letter is just give 3 evidences that Jesus was indeed God in the flesh. First, he says, we have seen him. That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have, what? Seen with our eyes, which we have looked at and our hands have touched. If you were God, how would you have gone about revealing yourself to man? God has continued to reveal himself through creation. Romans chapter 1, verse 20, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without what? Excuse. You ought to be able to look around and just look at God's creation and know if there is evidence of a design, that is proof that there is a what? A designer. You can't tell me you can go outside and look at all that God has created and the way it holds together in perfect unity and say that God didn't design that perfectly. It doesn't just happen that way. Christ is to us what our words are to others. You see, our words reveal to others just how we think and how we feel. Christ reveals to us his mind, the mind and heart of God. When our boys were small, and probably your children as well, when they wanted something, they would kind of crawl, do that, right? And what you eventually say to them, use your words. And now at times we think they will never shut up. Use your words. Words are the means by which we reveal our wants and our needs and our hearts to others. The same is true with God. He sent Jesus, the word of life, to reveal himself to us. John says, that which we have seen, which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked at. Make no mistake about it. We have seen and heard from the God of the universe. He loves us dearly. Secondly, John said, we have experienced him. The life appeared. We have seen it and testified to it, and we proclaim to you the eternal life which was with the Father and has appeared to us. We proclaim to you what we have seen and heard, so you also may have fellowship with us, and our fellowship is with the Father and is with his Son, Jesus Christ. John and other believers experienced God in the flesh. Jesus walked and talked with them, which means they had this amazing experience where they were able to interact with God himself. I think that's a very exciting moment and probably also very scary, all in the same sentence. When Jesus came, he not only revealed the eternal quality of God, but he passed eternity on to us. Jesus said in John's Gospel, John chapter 10, verse 10, the thief comes only to steal, to kill, and destroy. I have come that you might have life and have it to the full. There is a huge contrast between what the enemy came to do, to steal, to kill, and destroy, and what Jesus came to do, to give life and give it to the full. I don't know if you've ever had someone steal from you. A few years ago, Courtney got up for work, and we were all getting ready to go, and we walked outside, and when she got to her car, we noticed the window had been broken out. Looked inside and noticed that the car had been rummaged through, that her purse and wallet and all those things were gone. We felt violated. We felt angry. We felt frustrated. I mean, it's a lot of work. Canceling all your credit cards and your check cards and going to get, I mean, she even had her Social Security card in her wallet and her driver's license. You got to go get all new of that stuff. It just kind of felt taken advantage of. And that's the only thing that the enemy wants for you and I. He wants us to be taken advantage of. He wants to steal, to kill, to destroy. He's the reason that we find ourselves in this mess to begin with. But Jesus said he came to bring life. We have experienced eternal life with Christ, John said. John said we have experienced fellowship with God and with each other. Can you imagine what the apostles and some of those early Christians, what they experienced together? I mean, that had to be phenomenal. One of my favorite TV shows or mini-series, whatever you want to call it, of all time is a show called Band of Brothers. And it's this idea of these soldiers who were in World War II. And what makes this series so powerful is at the beginning and end of each episode, some of those real life warriors and soldiers start to explain what they experienced together. Things they went through, things they seen, and things they did. I love talking to people who served in real wartime experiences. It always completely blows my mind just how much they were willing to sacrifice for each other and for all of us. And I think any opportunity we get to tell someone who served in our military and given up so much, we say thank you. There's something powerful about the brotherhood of soldiers. I think the same should be true with our faith. You see, in war, it's called brotherhood, but in church, it's called fellowship. It's this idea where we participate with God and with each other. There's a strong bond or partnership between fellow believers. Whether we believe it or not, we are in a spiritual war. And we're going to need to have each other's backs. We're going to need Jesus, and we're going to need each other. Lastly, he said, we have found joy. 1 John chapter 1, verse 4, we write this to make our joy complete. Fellowship is Christ's answer to loneliness of life. Joy is his answer to emptiness, hollowness. John in his epistle used the word joy only once. But this idea of joy runs through the letter over and over and over. Joy is not something that you and I can manufacture for ourselves. Joy is the amazing and wonderful byproduct of a relationship with God. You see, the ones that John wrote this letter to were in the middle of extreme controversy. There were some who began to leave God's church. I'm sure that their nerves were frayed, that there were probably some discord, maybe some hard feelings. And so just in one brief moment, John says, listen, just remember that we're doing all of this so that our joy might be complete. It's easy to lose track of joy when it feels like you're constantly losing. I mean, when life continues to beat us down, to kick us, to spit upon us, when it feels like everything is lost, when you feel like there's just no reason to go on. Just this past week, a close friend of mine lost a nephew due to suicide. Suicide rates are growing at alarming rates, where people feel like they just can't go on one more day. Let me tell you, just hold on. Just hold on to hope. Because when it feels like all is lost, know that Jesus has defeated all, that God has conquered all. Romans chapter 8, verse 31, what then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? With God on our side, we cannot lose. Even if life doesn't go our way, if God never gives me another thing, God gave me eternal life through Jesus. When we no longer are the home team, maybe that's just the kick in the pants we needed to get to work. Maybe all of what's happened over the last 100 years, over the last 13, 14 months, maybe that was just the jump start we needed to realize that the stakes are too high for us to continue to sit around and let culture dictate what our faith looks like. Eternity is in the balance, folks. It's time for us to strap up and go to war for our faith. It's time for us to enter into this fellowship with God and with each other, where no matter what happens, we got each other's back. We've got to do that all for one single purpose: for the love of God to be shared with our entire planet.